When I first heard the story of the wise men as told by my primary teachers, elementary school, and listened to the meaning they gave them, somehow I thought that the wise men were poor in a material sense. I had the notion, too, that they were like hapless characters, weak, transient, even misfits in their own society. I thought there were some kind of nomads who crossed the desert to follow the star, searching for a new born king. That's what I thought. But after further review, as they do all the time in all the sports events now, after further review and some research and some study, I learned that the wise men, contrary to my own prior beliefs, were leaders of their day, highly respected individuals. You know, they were scientists, men skilled in philosophy, medicine, and astrology. It dawned on me, that's why they were called wise men. And that's why in this homily, I'm not going to call them magi or astrologers or pilgrims from the East. I'm going to stick with wise men, even though it may not be politically correct anymore. Because they were. Look at, they were wealthy enough to take a 2-year sabbatical, buy extravagant gifts, and go running all the way across the desert in search for a newborn king. Now it seemed to me that they were healthy-minded men, seekers of the truth. They had a very reverent respect for life. If anything, now it would appear that the so-called wise men were people who had everything. Think about it. Well, almost. You know, they didn't have a God. They didn't have a king. They didn't have what some people call a higher power to whom they could dedicate themselves and their possessions. In other words, the wise men had everything to live on, but it seems to me that they were searching and discerning, going either way to find something to live for, to find someone to live for. You know, they didn't have a Lord who was big enough to channel their basic goodness and talents into a creative and healthy purpose and usefulness. So they set across the desert in their searching to find a king, a Christ, who could give a meaning, who could give a purpose to their lives, these men who had everything to live on. You know, the fact of the matter is that possessions, no matter how many of them you have, are not an adequate basis for a meaningful life. How many examples can we think about in our society today where people who have everything to live on but don't have anything to live for, their lives turn sour? In fact, that might be a good subject sometime for another homily. So look at these wise men. After searching, discerning, they hooked their line to a star. It drew them beyond where they were and drove them forward. They traveled across the desert. They bowed themselves down before the Lord of life. And then they had this meeting, this encounter with Christ. And their lives changed. You know, how could it be? This helpless infant impacted these educated, brilliant, wealthy men. You know, was it a miracle? Or was it the fact, like we read in the 13th chapter of Hebrews, that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever? And can it happen to me and you right now? Just think, for the first act after they met the Christ child, they inconvenienced themselves. The gospel says they went home a different way. That's more than a travel log. They went home a different way, and the world has felt the hope of that different way ever since. Well, on this day, the Feast of the Epiphany, sometimes we call this Little Christmas, Gentile Christmas, our Christmas, because we are grafted on the vine. Christmas Day, we celebrated Jesus as the glory of Israel. Today, we celebrate Jesus as the light of revelation to the Gentiles, me and you. And as we come to meet Christ here in this Eucharist on this special day, remember this: what he wants from me and you most of all is not us bearing gifts necessarily. He's not looking so much for adoration. What he's looking for is imitation. Imitation. Jesus says, I am the way. He says, he who sees me sees God the Father. It's an imitation for us to inconvenience ourselves and go in a different direction, a life-giving direction. And it's so hard in our society today, when, especially this time of year, everybody's so much into self-fulfillment. We're being asked to be into self-giving, selflessness. That's the other way when it comes to our world. We are invited, meeting Christ in the Eucharist, to be grateful, make a grateful response to the overwhelming gift and goodness of life. And after meeting Christ on this special day, it can mean this for you and me, the possibility that we too might go a different way, to live a new kind of life of giving for his sake.